Okay, we're live with the October 8th edition of Prehistory Traveler's Guide podcast. I am host Gary Gerani, and today's topic is going to be on the iconic trading card set Dinosaurs Attack from Topps Comics. And joining me for the session will be Mike Fredericks, editor of Prehistory Times magazine.
Hi.
And our esteemed guest of honor is the creator of these iconic cards, Gary Gerani.
Hello there. Here I am. What excitement.
You're in LA, right, Gary?
Yeah, Sherman Oaks, which is
Sherman Oaks, yeah.
part of the same neighborhood.
Right.
So yeah, but that's not all Gary's done here, folks. He's also written a number of Hollywood screenplays, the most old of which being Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead. We might want to talk about that also during the production as well.
Yeah, that was cool. That was nice to, for someone who grew up as a monster kid collecting Famous Monsters magazines, it was certainly,
me too.
it was a tremendous thrill to be able to create my own famous monster, another rubber-suited guy, you know. I mean, I'm really lucky that worked out.
So you want to give us a 411 on early life, Gary, growing up, and what was the first thing that turned you into a monster kid like so many of us?
I was born in '53, which means that my earliest recollections are about maybe 1959, 1958, 59. I always tend to think, okay, what movies did I see in the theater at an early age so I could sort of like figure out my earliest memories. Some of my earliest memories were seeing Journey to the Center of the Earth in 1959, which had pretty nice, Dimetrodons. I mean, even though they were lizards with, that was actually a very well done sequence. And I think then a year later, Psycho, my crazy parents took me. I was in the back seat in the car to drive in. And I remember falling asleep at the point when Janet Leigh is driving and hearing voices, and I just was kind of lulled to sleep. But those are like my earliest memories from that period. And Famous Monsters was key. And as the 60s progressed, well, all the usual influences, the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, and it was pretty obvious to me that I was going to go in this kind of fantasy, horror, sci-fi direction. As a kid, I was an artist. I went to the High School of Art and Design. I thought I was going to become an illustrator, and I always would create fantastic monsters and creatures and things like that. And, and then ultimately I sold my first professional work as a writer, not as an artist. And now we're coming to early 70s, and my first thing I ever sold professionally was an article to the Monster Times, The Confessions of the Black Lagoon Creature, where I got to literally become the creature. And writing first person as the creature, as the gill man, I recounted my entire experience coming to Hollywood from the Amazon. It was this whole made-up thing. And basically, that started a whole series of the Monster Times of kind of monster point of view articles and humorous pieces like that. And it was that piece that got me my job at Topps, being able to write humor stuff. I got a call from Bram. I put an ad out in the Monster Times. If you were a regular writer for them, they gave you a classified ad. And at the time, I was collecting 16mm films. The only way you could own a movie, totally different than today, where all you have to do is, stream something. But back then, if you loved films and wanted to own them so you could watch them anytime you wanted to, you had to collect 16mm films, all right? And Len Brown collected 16mm films too, so I put an ad in the Monster Times saying, wanted 16mm, Outer Limits, science fiction, whatever. Len got back to me, we started to talk, and he said, yeah, I read your pieces in the Monster Times, and they're really funny. Would you like to come down and write some trading cards? I said, oh, what the hell? Okay. And so I started, I was a 72, 73, whatever it was, and that became a lifelong association with Topps. As of this year, I was still writing their Star Wars, but I mean, it's finally over. COVID and everything has kind of finally ended it. But all these decades and decades and decades, even though I was writing films and books and other things, I was always doing my work for Topps. Even when I was no longer on staff, I was on staff there until, oh my God, I moved to California in 89, 90. I started there around 72, and they let me be Tops West when I came out. I was still on the payroll. And then they started Tops Comics, okay, which I was the West Coast editor. So I dragged them along my whole life. Finally, when I became a free agent, I was still doing all their Star Wars sets and creating products for them. So that was one hell of a marriage, I have to say. And now that I'm retired, I'm getting a nice pension from them too, in addition to occasionally getting some work. So what can I tell you? So that's basically, while Tops was keeping me alive, I was able to jump into writing movies. Pumpkinhead, like I say, being, I thought we were just going to be doing a low-budget horror movie, and then Stan Winston got involved, and oh my God, we got a state-of-the-art monster. This is right after he shot Second Unit on Aliens. And that's how we got Lance Henriksen. It was right at the heart of that whole era. And it was like, oh, okay, our Pumpkinhead was kind of like the horror supernatural movie, as opposed to the Terminator films and the Aliens films, which were the side, but it seemed to be cut from the same cloth. And suddenly we were sort of in that ballpark, which was like, wow. And Stan did a beautiful job directing Pumpkinhead. Stan was an interesting guy. I mean, he could have a good sense of humor, and then sometimes be very dry and straight. Kind of unusual, but he put a lot of himself into Pumpkinhead. We had spoken to him ahead of time and said, our whole concept here, it's almost like a police procedural, but out in the sticks. This is how they do things out there. When someone has been wronged, they have their own methods of finding justice. And we wanted this to be somewhat detached. Even though you got a man losing his son, it was almost like a documentary overview of this event, as opposed to a very moist, oh, my son, my son. No. There's none of that in this. It keeps that dry overview kind of, exploration of this event. And I think that's what gives the film its power. If it had been very moist, it had been very, and it very easily could have slipped into that, it would be like a Charles Band horror movie. But this is unique. And I got to say, Stan knew what he was doing. It was great. So that's Pumpkinhead, and I've done other things, some things I didn't really want to talk about. I wrote a TV movie pilot based on Vampirella that Roger Corman produced. And Roger loved the script, but it was produced on a very cheap level. Talisa Soto was a Bond girl who played Vampy, and Roger Daltrey played Dracula, which is pretty cool. So I went down there in Vegas where they shot it. I spent the month there. I had a ball. Probably had more fun being there than people actually watching the finished movie. And I've done a whole bunch of other things. I did a Travolta movie last year, Trading Paint, which was a racing car drama. No monsters in it. And he's optioned another script from me, again, non-fantasy. But the fantasy and horror sci-fi stuff is really kind of where I live. And again, fantastic television was another important thing that I feel that I've done. In 1977, it was the very first book to cover the fields of science fiction, horror, and fantasy on television. There are a number of books out on horror movies and science fiction movies, but never anything that dealt with the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits and all these things between two covers. So that had the virtue of being the first of its kind, and I've become known for fantastic television over the years too. And whenever there's a Twilight Zone or Outer Limits thing, usually I'm invited to it, and I cherish that. Done tons of commentaries on the Blu-rays of Thriller, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, all that stuff. So that's definitely a part of who I am as well. And I guess that should, now that we've set me up and we're over at Tops, let me tell you this. When I first started at Tops, one of the first things I said is, gee, can we do another a sequel to Mars Attacks? That's something, Mars Attacks again. Right? And that's when they, told me, we're sorry, Gary, but we hate to tell you this, but Mars Attacks never sold. Original science fiction properties things of that nature have never done well. And Lynn Brown showed me the sales sheets on Mars Attacks, yeah, it became a cult item years later. But it would be impossible to convince the people at Topps to do another science fiction series. I created something called the Colossals, which I did pencil drawings for, which was basically Lovecraftian monstrosities attacking the world. So I did a number of these drawings of these gelatinous tentacled things wrapping their tentacles around buildings and all this kind of stuff. And again, showed it to Lance. Well, this is really cool, but we don't have we can't do it. What happened years later took many years, but in the 80s, dinosaurs were making a comeback. All of a sudden, everywhere you started seeing that. Barney was on TV, and this is even before Jurassic Park, but they were clearly making a comeback. So Topps came to me and said, Gary, what about doing a Mars Attacks, but with dinosaurs? Or actually, I think I was the one who probably suggested it. I was such a dinosaur nut. And but my memory of it was they loved the idea immediately. It wasn't like I had to fight that. They had just come off of Garbage Pail Kids, which is a huge, huge success. And so they were open to thinking, who knows what self-created product might catch on. Okay, dinosaurs are hot. Let's try that, right? So I was in my glory. This was totally my project. I named it, conceived it, drew all the storyboards for it, came up with the concept. This was like the project I was born to do at Topps, right? So it was very, very exciting just to be able to tackle this kind of thing. Unfortunately, when all was said and done, Dinosaurs Attack sales were identical to Mars Attack sales proportionately. I mean, these things become cult items years later and people love them. But at the time, they don't really know what it is. It confuses them. Topps had a tremendous history of success with what we used to call the slob humor, the wacky packages, the Garbage Pail Kids, all of that. And listen, Mars Attacks, and especially Dinosaurs Attack, were very subversive in a gleeful way, in a very similar way. But no, those things just never worked on a mass level. Once the industry began to evolve a little bit more into the comic shop world and that specialty world, those things became a little easier to do. Things I never could have done before. Now that we were catering to that market, direct sales and all that, we could do more interesting stuff. But Dinosaurs Attack in '88 was conceived as a mass market commercial product. Not something just aimed at comic shops. And like I say, it did okay, but not enough to justify the enormous costs. Because these things, you had to pay your artists. I mean, I'm slave labor. It didn't matter. I'm on staff, but you're talking about 50 paintings, and then paintings for stickers, and then paintings for boxes, and it all adds up. And it just didn't ultimately for Dinosaurs. Although they had such faith in it that they actually had a commercial made, which ran in the afternoons. Kids were watching He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, or Teenage Mutant Ninja, whatever the heck was out at that time. And there they'd see a commercial for Dinosaurs Attack, a 30-second spot, I think it was, which is great. I have a copy of it. One of these days I'll release it to the world. It's not on YouTube or no one has that. But there's a real dinosaur in it, and we shot. It was just great. It's a great commercial. So it showed they had so much faith in it, based on At the Shore, the Predator, looking at all the art that I do, was, this is going to be huge. So we even spent money for a commercial. But it, like I say, although, hey, almost instantly, Warner Brothers optioned it to make a movie out of it. Joe Dante, who had just done Gremlins, and I kind of knew Joe, I even showed him some. I said, look what we're doing. He's going, oh, damn it, look at this. So Warner Brothers optioned it as a project for Joe. Unfortunately, and this has never been confirmed, but some friends have told me this, a big Dinosaurs Attack fan was Michael Crichton, who apparently was inspired by my cards to create Jurassic Park. Now, what happened when he created Jurassic Park? Warner Brothers had optioned Dinosaurs Attack, and then all of a sudden, a few months later, or maybe 6 months later, whatever it was, the first galleys or whatever to his first attempt at writing Jurassic Park were just sent out to see if there was interest in Hollywood. Of course, it's Michael Crichton. So Spielberg, oh yeah, Joe Dante himself, oh yeah. So even though whoops, we will not be bothered by this. I'm so sorry. Thought I had pulled this out. Just give me a second.
I'm not gonna mind it that much.
There we go. We won't be interrupted by phone ringing. But anyway, Joe Dante, right? So even though he loved it, because a lot of it was his sick kind of humor, Michael Crichton was Michael Crichton. This was a big deal. And essentially, Jurassic Park replaced Dinosaurs Attack as a movie. Now, I got there first, and I got a big studio optioning me first. I wanted to be the guy who brought back the concept of dinosaurs in the 20th century, the 21st century now, but in the 20th century, back in the here and now, running after people, chewing people up, knocking buildings. I wanted to be the guy who brought back the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Well, Jurassic Park wound up being that to a large degree. But Dinosaurs Attack was always like in and around the cracks of it. I remember when I saw Jurassic Park for the first time, you had that bit where the guy is hiding in the bathroom on the toilet and the T-Rex goes in. I said, that's a Dinosaurs Attack card right there. Toilet humor and everything. Right?
Yep.
Now that I've spoken forever, let me shut up and you guys can ask me stuff.
Okay, here. My first question, I think, would be about Pumpkinhead. Do you have any memorable stories or anecdotes from your time working on the Pumpkinhead set, writing the screenplay, and do you have any additional stories I can share about working with the late director, Stan Winston?
Pumpkinhead was the concept, the Demon of Revenge concept. I had come up with, along with my buddy Mark Carducci, in the 1970s. We were doing like a 16 millimeter, Super 8, 16 millimeter kind of, a horror movie we were making. We were just monster kids who loved this stuff. So I had created two stories, the 7 Gargoyles of Satan, representing the sins of man, and somehow revenge was one of the, and that was where the Demon of Revenge's origin point was. There's another story that I had written called Hell Mountain. So those two things together were the basis of Pumpkinhead. Of course, he was never called Pumpkinhead at that point. He had no name. It was just the Demon of Revenge. It was really years later now. We did this thing. We even shot a little. I contributed my Don Post Creature from the Black Lagoon mask to be our Demon of Revenge. We put a kind of thing over it, whatever, and somehow Pumpkinhead's origin point was the creature from the, makes perfect sense, right? So we were doing all that kind of stuff and didn't go anywhere. Decade goes by, whatever. Eventually, Mark, I'm busy creating stuff for Topps. Mark is selling some low-budget horror movies, doing that. And he connected with these producers in New York who wanted to do a horror movie. And they had optioned the title Pumpkinhead, which was a poem by a person named Ed Justin, a.k.a. Honest Ed Justin, who was a person in licensing and merchandising that I had actually dealt with in terms of properties for Topps. It's like, oh my God. So he wrote this poem. That's not our thing. That Be Afraid of Pumpkinhead. That is Ed Justin's work. We just used it in our story. So our Demon of Revenge, we dusted off. I mean, Mark comes to me one night and says, hey, they want to do a horror movie. They've got this title, Pumpkinhead. Why don't we take our old Demon of Revenge story and do a backwoods Terminator? And it was like, ooh, okay. That's kind of what we were playing with anyway. And at that point, Stan Winston wasn't involved. You're talking about some New York producers who were cool guys, Billy Blake, and they had done a few films. They did Rhinestone and The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, a few other movies. But this was pre-Stan Winston. And we have other directors involved at different points. And then as a matter of fact, at a certain crazy evolution, the Demon of Revenge started out as a Lovecraftian demon. That's why the Creature from the Black Lagoon was a reasonable substitute for him. But when his name became Pumpkinhead, and we're saying he's still the demon of revenge. But then we all sat down and said, people are going to expect a pumpkin as a head, like a Sleepy Hollow monster with a pumpkin head. So we revised our Lovecraftian concept. Now, when Ed Harley goes to the witch, what the witch tells Ed Harley, or this conception, was go to the cemetery, dig out a body, cut the head off, and bring me the body. Meanwhile, as he's doing that, she's carving a face into the pumpkin. And when he brings the body, the head is put on, and just the way farmers would, combine things or whatever to work the earth, or this is kind of a similar thing. It's put together, and it becomes this Ichabod Crane, whatever you want to call it, Sleepy Hollow kind of a creature. Okay, that had never been done before. And it was kind of an exciting icon. So, okay, we could sacrifice our Lovecraftian demon for an interesting concept like that. Then all of a sudden, Stan Winston gets involved. You've got Stan Winston involved. You're not going to go for a pumpkin on a human body. You want a whole new creature. So, back we went to our original concept of the Lovecraftian demon, and we got the greatest Lovecraftian demon anyone ever created. I mean, Pumpkinhead nailed it. And the fact that he even looked a little bit like the alien, to me, that was great, because our whole notion of this demon, it's like it's a physical life form, I mean, it's not magical. We wanted to suggest that there's a physical, we don't really know what's behind all this. So there is a little sci-fi mixed in with all the supernatural lore. And I just said, the idea of this head-to-toe rubber creature, Lovecraftian demon, walking around farmhouses and all that, what a fantastic, concept. I mean, just the imagery of something like that. So once Stan got involved, we all agreed it's got to be a made-up monster. We got the greatest monster maker of all for us, okay? And basically, his people designed it. We had some conversations. People designed it. Alec and those guys really created it. And Tom Woodruff and even played Pumpkinhead. Tom plays Pumpkinhead. So Stan directed the movie, and as the director, he was able to. Of course, he's worked with these guys were his proteges, so he was so used to working that he was able to convey to them what he wanted out of that monster and out of that creation. So they actually created it based on his guidance, and he would be the first to tell, "Oh no, I directed the movie. They made the monster." But one hell of a monster. Now keep in mind, at exactly this time, I'm also still at Topps in Brooklyn. Topps was still in Brooklyn, creating and doing Dinosaurs Attack. And some people have speculated, including myself, yeah, I had demons on the brain, which is probably why I invented this dinosaur devil god entity that is behind what the dinosaurs are doing, because that whole combination of demonology and science fiction was buzzing around in my brain at exactly that time. It was also my little homage to Nigel Neal and 5 Million Years to Earth, Quatermass in the Pit, where the whole history of our race is because of the Martians, where, well, this is the dinosaurs are kind of placed in the same, and now they want to come back, and there's an intelligence behind them that wants to reclaim the world. Oh my God. Way too fanciful for anything you would find in the original Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs Attack was meant to be everything, meaning it was my tribute to all the sci-fi and monster movies that I ever grew up with. All through it, there are references, there are connections, and it essentially, oh yeah, it's like the 1950s dinosaur pictures. Yeah, but it's also like the 1960s science fiction movies like Fantastic Voyage, Crack in the World, where you have the super scientific installation, all these guys on lab coats desperately working around, dealing with this situation. So it tapped into everything I ever grew up with. And I always felt if it was made into a movie, the person who made it into a movie, I love Joe Dante's great, and Tim Burton also optioned it years later. At the same time, he optioned Mars Attacks, and he was going to do Dinosaurs Attack first, but then he got nervous because of Jurassic Park and shoved it, not realizing that Independence Day was going to steal his thunder on that one. Okay, no matter which way he turned, he was in trouble. But no, it really represented everything I ever loved, and it had to be. I guess what I was starting to say is, I actually think Sam Raimi, the movie that captures it more than any movie Sam Raimi would have been great, but the original RoboCop is everything I was doing with Dinosaurs Attack, where the violence and gore is so extreme and over the top, it becomes parody. And once it becomes parody, that takes the edge off. So you can sit through RoboCop and laugh after Ed 209 has wiped out this poor businessman because it's so crazy and so extreme. And part of what I was doing a parody of was Mars Attacks, was the top's tendency to go completely over the top and no restrictions in anything we did. That's part of our legacy. On the one hand, we're the wholesome baseball card company. On the other hand, we're the nutty, subversive crazies, right? So Dinosaurs Attack had all. It made perfect sense that I would play Dr. Elias Thorne, the guy who starts all the trouble in the story, because it was my project, and the gimmick of taking photos of everybody at Tops. So the painter could work those and make the images almost photorealistic. I mean, that was a key thing. And so as long as I was taking pictures of everybody, I might as well play the main scientist. That makes sense. So yeah, that's what that was about.
That's pretty cool. Now, if you were to pitch a modernized edition of Dinosaurs Attack, would you potentially do things a tad differently? Or would you more try to keep it the same as the actual cards or the comic?
It's an interesting question, because it could go either way. People can interpret it any number of ways. Part of what the essence of it was, there was an extreme melodrama flavor to it. Okay. Which is pretty much the opposite of how, today they take comic book where they take these and they try to make them as real and conversational and down to earth, because the heroes are just like real people, and what brilliant script, look how they're talking so naturally, and it's none of this. Okay. Whereas Dinosaurs Attack was always a reflection of the over-the-top paranoia of the Cold War, of that whole era of the 50s and 60s. And here we are in the 21st century. I don't know how relevant that is, but I would still say, if you do parody, make sure you do it the right way, a la RoboCop, all of things like that. Okay, not Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but RoboCop. But make sure you keep the melodrama. If you can throw in a few snatches of Dominic Frontieri's music from the Outer Limits here and there, okay, that's exactly the high-stress, high-tension melodrama of perfect for what the 50s, 60s science fiction paranoia was all about. And the way Tarantino will throw in music for some classic things to capture that flavor. I would actually do a few cues here that remind people of where this came from. But I think key to the whole thing, I'm a screenwriter, so I can tell you, the story of the main character is really, underneath it all, is a very grown-up story about a man who lost his faith in God when he lost a loved one and couldn't buy it anymore. And he became a replacement for God, because human beings should have a father figure. So Elias Thorne was, in a sense, in the nicest way possible, playing God. Well, you know what happens when you play God. But because the dinosaurs have a God, gee, maybe we do too. So he gave up his belief in that and became a god because there really wasn't one. But in a strange way, he's come full circle because that suggests that because of the nature of dinosaurs being savage and essentially savage animals that would just tear you apart, if they had an entity watching over them, it would be a predatory entity. If we have a god watching over, we'd like to think it's a benevolent god. So without actually spelling out all this pretentious claptrap, especially essentially a children's product, it's all embedded, buried in there. A little more of it comes out in the graphic novel. But at the end, when he's facing this thing in its hand, the supreme monstrosity, whatever you want to call it, the dinosaur devil guy, he's elated. It's like, you really exist. I'm not nuts. It wasn't me, because I laid this whole thing, maybe unconsciously your own self-hate. Maybe you triggered this end of the world, right? All these so no, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. There really was an evil god out there. And guess what? Maybe we got a good god out there too. So his death is actually, as much as it can be, kind of a happy death, because his soul has been saved in a way. Now, all of this stuff, like I say, would have to be soft pedaled, but a good director, a Raimi or whatever, would know it and would say, I'm going to have fun with crazy stuff, but I'm never going to lose sight, because that's what will make it resonate. Without that, it's just, like I say, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes with scales. It'll blow away, you know. But that's my view. If a filmmaker is going to do it, Del Toro, Guillermo del Toro will be another guy who would probably get it, because the Pacific Rim has Dinosaurs Attack flavoring, you know, like crazy. Yeah, so there are people who could do it. God knows if it'll ever happen now, because it's kind of been eclipsed by, pardon the expression, and now that that Jurassic Park has become Jurassic World, it is literally Dinosaurs Attack now. I mean,
in a sense, yes.
If I wrote a Dinosaurs Attack story, for instance, at one point I proposed it as a TV series. I tried everything, right? And I came up with a season's worth of episodes. In one episode, a little black kid who's an orphan in urban decay area befriends a little hatched pteranodon, which becomes his friend and all that. You could do that as a Jurassic World story now, you know. So there's almost, other than the fact that there's an evil force guiding this dinosaur invasion. Yes. Really what it was. It was like War of the Worlds at the same time. The difference of the Jurassic thing and dinosaurs is that Jurassic dinosaurs are our friends. They're just misunderstood. It's man having to learn how to now live with dinosaurs and all that. Okay. No. My dinosaurs are evil. My dinosaurs do horrible things, and our heroes might shoot the crap out of them with guns and things. Where none of this. We go for the gusto. That's a key difference.
Yeah.
And yes, to be fair, I think there should be a place for all forms of dinosaur movies. You know, stuff that takes things seriously, like with Jurassic Park, or over the top and violent and, you know, self-reflective, like, you know, Dinosaurs Attack. There's a place for everything in all forms of media regarding dino media.
There really aren't that many dinosaur movies other than the Jurassic. I mean, there were a few cheapo.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Unlike superheroes or even science fiction, space, there were no other ones. It's almost like the world said, one is enough. Dinosaurs are limited in what pleasure you get, so we'll put up with one franchise all the time, but how many more can we take, right? Granted, if a Dinosaurs Attack movie had been done correctly, it would be such a unique, wild, weird thing on its own terms that it would, you know, you wouldn't even have to compare it to it. It would just be what it is. It would be cool. But hey, I've tried over the years with other filmmakers, other studios. Hey, listen, you try and you fail. I remember after Pumpkinhead, Mark Carducci and I, we got the movie rights to Mars Attacks through my connections at Topps. And we wrote a great Mars Attacks script. which had to do with we used the gimmick of a family gathering. It's something I stole from an old Twilight Zone. A family gathering together to celebrate their parents' anniversary, and at the height of, I mean, they all come from all different family members, but whatever. At the height of the celebration on the TV, war breaks out. What's going on, or whatever? We keep it a mystery, and all the family members have to go their separate ways. The young man who's in the military has to go back to his baby, blah blah blah, blah. And the guy with his wife or whatever, he's on the road. Each way, we got a little Panic in the Year Zero with Panic on the Road. We got military stuff with our young. So through one family, we were able to tap all the different flavors of Mars Attacks. And of course, we treated Mars Attacks as a nightmare, not as a joke. Dinosaurs Attack was deliberately created with a sense of humor, a sense of parody. The original Mars Attacks, no humor, no parody, no sense of tongue-in-cheek, totally straight, which is what scared the shit out of me as a kid. And my feeling was, hey, Tim Burton did his Mars Attacks very much the way 1960s did the Batman TV series. Funny and campy, whatever. But they didn't quite grasp what was the real heart and soul of what that material, if you let it come off on its own terms. So it took years before they rediscovered the Dark Knight flavors of Batman again. Well, my feeling was always, okay, same thing with Mars Attacks. You have the goofy, campy version. Then years later, somebody eventually does the correct version, right? Well, God knows if that'll ever happen, right? Mars Attacks now, to 99% of humanity, is act, funny, crazy stuff. The people who grew up with it know better. Anyway, that was what we had. The reason I mentioned that is that we went all over town, and everybody told us, all the studios, we don't think War of the Worlds kind of movies are coming back. I'm going, wait a minute. It's Star Wars, but on Earth. It's the one thing that hasn't been done again yet. Oh, no, we don't think so. Excuse me. A couple of years later, we have both Independence Day and Mars Attacks fighting each other. and I'm going, ay. And everybody in the world is doing an invasion from space story. So, that's showbiz. What can I tell you? I should be grateful. I got a famous monster out of my life, a famous Hollywood movie monster, Pumpkinhead. I should be grateful for the good things that have happened. And Dinosaurs Attack as a card set and a comic, it'll always have fans, whether or not it ever sees life, as a film. Most of what I create in other media, I always have a film in mind. I wrote a graphic novel called Bram Stoker's Death Ship, which was all about the voyage of the Demeter from Transylvania to England, and Dracula preying on the crew. Well, I said that would be a great story unto itself. And we had a few people interested in doing a film, whatever. That didn't go anywhere. That also still would make a great movie. So they're out there, folks, waiting to be filmed.
Certainly. Now back on to Mike. Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I went trick-or-treating, and some neighbors gave me a pack of Mars Attacks, and it just really changed my life. I'll tell you.
I'm about to say it probably ruined you forever, right? Well, if you saw the destroying a dog card as a kid,
yeah, right,
that had to twist your brain for it.
Right. And then you do it in Dinosaurs Attacks too by having
a
dog crush.
Our tribute to that.
That's right.
Because the dinosaurs would usually just stomp on people. I mean, the Martians use their death rays. Dinosaurs would either chew you or stomp on you. Method of attack.
So those first couple of cards. Did you actually paint the final painting on like card 3 with you and the picture and everything?
No. My relationship with art, specifically doing art, is very, very strange because I went to school as an artist, and I do have I certainly have design ability. I've done storyboards for a million things, and I've pencil designed almost all the Topps products and the designs of the borders and the gimmicks and all of that. So that's being an artist in a sense. But in terms of finished painting, I'm a smart enough art director to know that I'm not a good enough painter to do that. So what I would do is hire people to fulfill what I wanted to see. So to answer your question, no, I never did any actual finished painting. I did do a lot of the, I did rough drawings, storyboards of every single card.
Right, I realize, right.
I also, for the graphic novels, I also did storyboards with the panels of how they even appear. So
that I didn't know. Uh-huh.
I mean, Herb Trimpe said, "My God, your design, you do." I said, "I know. Does it make?" I said, "It makes life easier for me." So he said, "Fine." So that was how emotionally, creatively invested I was. But then again, I'm smart enough to know, let's get someone who's a real professional to take it to the next level. So I would hired Herb, who was Art Spiegelman's suggestion. Of course, Herb Trimpe did all these great war comics and all this kind of stuff. He was ideal for this kind of conflict. So I had Herb do most of the finished pencils. Yeah. And then my original choice was Earl Norham to do the finished paintings, because Earl, I felt, was the closest to Norm Saunders in being able to achieve that kind of pulpy magazine cover look. Okay, that kind of defines the look of it. Now we wound up using X-Note, Chet Dante, who was a wonderful artist who was able to really hit that photorealistic painted look. Earl did X amount of the cards, Chet did most of them. And then I think, for the stickers, we had a slightly different team.
Right.
My thoughts on that were, well, maybe we can have the stickers convey true facts about dinosaurs. But I was still so much of a nut. I said, yeah, but I still want the sticker dinosaurs to have a baby carriage in their mouth. And, I don't want to lose the dinosaur attack flavor, even though I think the backs of those, as I recall, were just factual information.
Right. I think my confusion is because some people are selling the cards with your signature autograph on the cards. Like,
yeah, Topps. I guess Topps did a special set where, for years I had suggested, let's do a Dinosaurs Attack, Mars Attacks crossover. Well, they finally did it. Okay, they didn't even ask me about it. They just did it. Okay, God bless. I'm not really part of their world anymore. But then they contacted me to sign things connected with the release of that, and because they never officially, I am the creator of Dinosaurs Attack. That is the official credit, even in the graphic novels. So I guess there's no special credit. So I'm just listed as an artist, and because I art directed it and did do art technically on it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it portrays me as if I was one of the painters, and that is not true. I did everything else other than that.
That's fine. It was some of the cards that showed, the scientist who is you. Yeah. So I thought maybe you did just those cards,
Well, that scientist who, yeah. I mean, again, I posed for a photo. The picture with me with the saurian creature behind me that a lot of people take for Pumpkinhead, right? That very photo I probably have. I took out my trusty Polaroid and just took everybody, and they took me, and I posed in the appropriate ways.
Right. And one card actually has a photo of your face all beat up on the back of it too.
Yes. And that, if you might note, everything that I do, if you really look into it, you'll find the origin point of what I'm doing a takeoff. Dinosaurs Attack was great because since it was a parody, I could tap into anything I ever wanted to do, and no one's going to accuse me of plagiarism if you're doing a takeoff. Okay, what you're talking about with that photo, that was my homage to Christopher Lee's peeling face in Horror of Dracula. So when I approached John Cruz in our design department to do the airbrushing, I had the photo, and I still have the photo. And I suggest, okay, and I took a picture of the Horror of Dracula photo. I said, I want my face to peel this way, whatever. I did a rough sketch, and that works out fine. It's a very effective, pretty horrifying, of course, for the back, and of course the melodrama. Helen, I'll love you always. All of this.
Right.
How much fun is it to be able to just go full blast with something like that?
And some of the other faces were actual people that worked at Topps then?
Almost all the faces you see.
Yeah, it looks like they are actual people.
Well, we've got all the famous people too. You've got Len Brown, Art Spiegelman,
right.
President of the company, Arthur Shore. I mean, they're all in there. Cy Berger, who was a famous person who created the All-American Baseball card sign, was a great guy.
That's cool,
and he's in there. He, I think, is the general that's been our forces flattened. I think that's Cyberger. Stan Hart, who was the head writer of the Carol Burnett Show and would come and do humor for us. You know, he's also the Mad Magazine did most of their parodies. And I'd have to work with Stan, and Stan would say, Gary, I'm doing a parody on the Gremlins movie. You're doing the cards. Can you get me a copy of the screenplay that you're working from? I said, I'm not supposed to do that, Stan. Let me have it. So he couldn't say no to Stan, because overpowering personality. Well, as it turns out, that screenplay had a different ending than the movie. So his parody in Mad Magazine has the ending in the version of the script that I gave it. But Stan Hart is the one with the trilobite terror. Oh!
Yeah. That's his idea, huh? That's one of the cards that most people say, trilobites didn't do that. Yeah, I'm just saying.
But you see, if a trilobite and all these other nice dinosaurs, if they're being governed by an evil godlike force,
well, that's true.
Yeah, they're just, whatever their natures are, throw that away. They're just coming at you.
Yeah, like Stegosaurus is eating policemen.
That's right. Well, what about the one where I have Manhattan Island completely, not only are dinosaurs, but the entire landscape and vegetation from the prehistoric world has turned Manhattan Island into this giant swamp with giant insects.
I'll go back to letting Greg have a question, but I did want to say that Zoom has decided not to cut us off, so we can talk as long as we want. Thank you.
Yes.
And I was wondering if I could go over some of the cards with you after Greg has a question.
That sounds good. If you had to, Gary, do you happen to have any particular specific favorite cards from the overall set from Dinosaurs Attack, and were there any cards that you had wanted to go about having produced but ended up scrapping?
In terms of favorites, first of all, I guess you'd have to say, what art did you like the best, as opposed to perhaps what cards overall because of the complete.
That sounds like favorite.
Of Chet's pieces, boy, I really liked Homeroom Horror, with a T-Rex head smashing into a classroom and the teacher everybody going nuts. That one I particularly liked. I seem to recall also the Heartland Horror, where the Ankylosaur is smacking a poor farmer with a spiked pail or whatever. There were some really, really good ones. I do love, I think it was it Earl Norham who did the finished painting on the one at the museum, which has a Tyrannosaurus attacking a Tyrannosaurus skeleton as everybody's running for their lives. God, I remember in the graphic novel, I think I added some, where one of the scientists, as he's running, is like, "See, I was right. No feathers." But anyway, the whole thing, by the way, it broke my heart. I mean, I'm one of these guys, just like Ray Bradbury and Ray Harryhausen, putting myself in very esteemed company. We all loved the classic dinosaurs who stood upright and dragged their tails. The Tyrant King, when you used to go to the American Museum of Natural History, there he was, standing tall and proud. Wow. Now he's been reduced to a scavenging chicken, and with feathers, no less, that make him look like alfalfa from the Lost Valley, I'm going, excuse me, I don't know if I would ever fall in love with dinosaurs if that's how they were presented to me. They were just the greatest looking super dragons that ever lived. So if there is a new Dinosaurs Attack, will they have feathers? I don't know. We could have fun with that too. I think I also had didn't I have Professor Thorne at one point? One of the accomplishments is that he proved that the whole asteroid thing was a hoax. And it was my way of saying, the things I don't like that we've learned, I'm going to have my scientists say, I've proven that they're all wrong. Oh, what can one say?
That's good. I noticed that the Raptors don't have any blood and gore on them. I guess were they trying to be careful by having the They're just dinosaurs eating
Well, I
plants.
gotta say, the red one, he's
Yeah.
got a guy in his mouth, and this.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're right. You're right.
I think most of them, the others, I believe, had just cities, buildings kind of toppling, which is all part of the experience too. But the gore is part of what Tops did that took it further than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely on the box. I mean, the trilobites eating the guy's face.
Yeah, I selected. Oh, yeah, that's another one I loved with the. Oh, see, these are my favorite. His homeroom horror, and on the other side is the one with the people on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that one. I've seen animations made of that one right there.
Wasn't that great? I've seen that too. That really tickled me when I saw it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I'm so flattered that people enjoy these enough to even play with them that way.
Right. Well, I was going to go over some of the cards with you, but I tell you, you've kind of answered a lot of my questions. But like the Crush of a Canine was a tribute to Mars Attacks, and Italy Under Siege was a tribute to Ray Harryhausen's Rhedosaurus.
Oh yeah. That was the other thing. I wanted to have famous movie dinosaurs make Roger Rabbit-like cameo appearances throughout Dinosaurs Attack. And that reaches its crescendo when the army is all ready and they're looking through the binoculars. Okay, here's the army we're facing. And I remember in the graphic novel, as we're sort of panning across this dinosaur army, they're all movie dinosaurs. Here's the giant lizard from the Lost World. Here's the giant behemoth. And then finally, next to us, there's even Gertie the dinosaur among them. Like, okay, I think they're going to get the gimmick of what I'm trying for.
Right. I was going to say that the Colonel being ripped in half was something you came up with before Lost World Jurassic Park 2 did, because they did the two T-Rexes ripped the guy in half.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So you beat him to that punch.
Well, we tried. When you have so many ones to do, sooner or later you're just like, okay, what can we do now? On top of that, they were so sure this was going to be a mega hit that they had me develop the second series as well, because that's what they were used to doing with Garbage Pail Kids or whatever. You just move forward to the next set. And so I had to come up with a sequel idea, which was a sequel idea. How do you follow the finale of what I had? Well, I came up with a way to do it all over again, and commissioned maybe about a dozen or so pieces. But when they chose not to move forward, I think even had the dinosaur devil god grabbing this guy on a motorcycle and whatever. There was incredible weird stuff in that new storyline. The time streams were still open. They were still gonna, I don't know. I think I had this other gimmick where part of the time streams threw them into different periods of Earth's past, so that now we know how the Titanic really sunk. It wasn't an iceberg. It was a dinosaur. So I was just trying to figure out how many different creative ways we can see dinosaurs attacking. So what happened, since the sequel card set never happened, I rolled all those images into the graphic novels that eventually happened.
Yeah. Right. Card number 17 is a obvious tribute to Gorgo, where Gorgo's head's coming up out of the water there.
Yeah, I think I got his red eyes in there too, right?
You even have a Gorgo poster back behind your door over there, I could see.
Yeah, a bunch of other monster movies there too. Godzilla King of the Monsters, Giant Behemoth.
As you mentioned, Giant Behemoth and the Beast and Troy.
Got alien figure behind you.
Yeah. By the way, I mentioned Gorgo just as a little aside. The original beautiful movie poster painting for Gorgo was done by Joe Smith, who's the same wonderful Hollywood movie poster painter who did Ben-Hur with the chiseled in stone letters and ultimately Earthquake and a million other great iconic movie posters. And he and I became great friends, and this year I have a book coming out, The Art of Joe Smith, which will publish that Gorgo and other stuff that we've never even seen before, his work. So there's a real Gorgo Joe Smith connection there too that was very, very, very strong. Little plug for my upcoming book.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, let's see what.
Oh, by the way, Gorgo was one of the seminal. My favorite dinosaur movies are the Eugene Laurier dinosaur trilogy: The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, The Giant Behemoth, and Gorgo, because they're variations on a theme, and each one of them is a wonderfully different movie in its own right. If you want to give yourself do yourself a little favor and have a little treat for yourself, watch all three of them back to back, because they're short, and you can do it in, I don't know, 4.5, 5 hours, whatever the heck it is. But it's fascinating to see the evolution of Eugene Laurier's relationship with the dinosaur on the loose attacking a city concept. You see it go from standard aspect ratio with the Beast, then it becomes 1:8:5 widescreen with the Behemoth, and then with Gorgo it becomes Technicolor and widescreen. And even though Gorgo is a guy in a suit, a la Godzilla, and not stop motion, the movie, like I say, all three of them are great movies in their own right.
Yeah.
So just so you know, Mr. Dinosaurs Attack, those are my favorite dinosaur movies.
Right.
And there's some of my favorites as well.
Me too.
Some personal favorites. Favorites and gotta think of it. Do you have any other favorite monster? Any other favorite kaiju flicks other than the three you just mentioned?
Well, I can tell you my own relationship with that. Again, someone of my age, basically, our first exposure to this was the showing of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, on $1 Million Movie in New York. I was a New York monster kid, where I think it was around 59, 58, something like that. And $1 Million Movie would repeat the movie every single night of the week. So you have to try to somehow convince your parents to let you watch it more than once, which is very, very hard to do. So that was the first time I saw any Japanese monster, was Godzilla, on TV when I was really little. But by the 1959 rolls, I'm now going to the movies, right? So I saw Gigantus the Fire Monster, which was the sequel to Godzilla, King of the Monsters, in 1959 on a double bill with the Mysterians, another Japanese monster sci-fi movie. And I was the only kid in the theater who's watching Gigantus saying, but wait a minute, this is Godzilla. I don't get this. They even showed in Gigantus, they even have stock footage from the original Godzilla. And they're calling him Anguirus or whatever, they're not even calling him Godzilla. And I'm going, am I going crazy? I know this is Godzilla. Why is the whole theater saying, hey, this is Godzilla? No, the kids just were watching. And I'm going, I guess I'm the only one. Maybe that's what I realized. Someday I'd write about these movies to explain what the hell's going on, right? Because it took me years before I realized. I didn't even realize when I saw King Kong versus Godzilla a few years later in 1963, that when he comes out of the iceberg, that was the iceberg from Gigantus.
Mm-hmm.
But that movie treats it like he was in ice since the prehistoric age. They just ignored whatever mythology came before. So that was my earliest. Now, Rodan, I saw at a kiddie matinee in 1960, a week before $1 Million Movie on Channel 9 in New York showed it for the first time. So I got to see it in color, because we all had black and white TVs back then. I got to see it in the theater, in color, at a Saturday matinee. And guess what? The second feature with it for that matinee was Gigantus, which I got to see. My poor mom, I dragged her to that. I mean, sometimes I go with my dad, sometimes I go with my mom, sometimes I go with my friends. And my mother, for all these years, saying, oh, all those awful Japanese movies the acting was so bad. She said, well, Mom, they were dubbed. You really can't, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, one thing about them, at least they were short.
Yes.
What can I tell you? So that was my, and then like 1960, if you were a kid around that time, it was Godzilla and Rodan and the Mysterians for some, Then all of a sudden it was in 61, 62, Mothra shows up for the first time. And that's when they began to expand their zoology of characters, if you will. And then when they King Kong versus Godzilla, that set up this whole, monsters fighting with each other. Although technically that was started in Gigantus. But yeah, and then we were just, the weird thing is for us kids at that period, the last real Godzilla movie that we saw was Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. because that was released nationally. Big deal. It was released as a co-feature with Elvis Presley and Harem Scarum, and the headline for that was "It's the Beat and the Beast." So that was the last Godzilla movie that a major distributor released. After that, try to find them. It took a few years, and eventually Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. They began to show up in theaters again. But from the mid-'60s to the early '70s, those movies just seemed to be invisible. You'd see a Monster Zero on TV because you never saw it playing in a theater. So I began to distance. Also, this is the late '60s now. I was getting into the drug culture. I was getting into the hippie movement. I was, I was briefly not thinking about monsters, although it didn't take long for that to swing back into my life.
Naturally.
Anyway, that's pretty much my relationship with the Japanese monsters. Also, another one that people have forgotten, which isn't a giant monster, is a movie called Half Human, which was their Peking Man, the Bionicle Soldier.
Yeah, there's a story behind that.
Good point.
Yeah, there's a story attached to Half Human in its original Japanese release. It's actually banned in Japan because of its insensitive portrayal of the indigenous peoples.
The natives there, yeah. I remember for years you were not able to see that in its original Japanese form. All you could do is watch doobie copies of the American John Carradine version,
Sadly.
which does have the best scenes of the Japanese version in it, at least. I mean that scene. Usually, monster movies would not scare. Monsters are my friends. They were your substitute power symbols. Topps actually transferred some irate housewives to me so I could explain this to them. I said, no. If I was doing normal crazy people with knives slashing, but monsters are made up. This is all fantasy. When I was a kid watching King Kong do this or do that, I knew the difference between that. And let me tell you something, miss. It's a catharsis for kids. Kids have all this frustration. They're weak. They want a power symbol, someone that they could live through viscerally. And monsters serve that purpose. Kids feel insecure. They feel like misfits, just like monsters do. So this is a good, necessary part, a healthy part of their design. Yeah, I'm saying that. I'm hoping it's true. It sounds good to me, anyway.
I gotta say, you have a card that does pay homage to Godzilla, because the dinosaur goes into the Japanese film studio where the guy's got the suit on and attacks.
And you'll notice, I even have the actors there.
Yeah.
Positioned very much as they were in some of the posters. So it's a parody of the posters of the Japanese and the whole concept in general. I mean, like I say, I'm just there thinking, okay, what else could I do?
And you said something else that made me come up with a question too. When I was a kid, I used to like something called Hamilton's Invaders, horrible Hamilton toys. They only lasted 1 year in '64 because moms complained about them so much. They were giant. It was like Mars Attacks. They were giant insects attacking soldiers and futuristic tanks and stuff. I don't know.
Are those the ones that were like dioramas, kind of?
No.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of something that came out years later. There was a giant scorpion, and these were not models.
That was.
I forgot what they were called, but there was, and they did exactly what we did. They even took newspaper headlines and whatever. That might have been a later.
Those were model kits. What I'm talking about were actual toys,
God, I don't
complained about so much they quit making them, and that's kind of what happened with Mars Attacks too, right? I'm sorry.
I would have loved that as a kid. For some reason, I never came across that.
But did anything happen with Dinosaurs Attacks like Mars Attacks, where parents were complaining so much that it had any effect on Topps at all? Because you started to say that you were, talking to mother.
Yeah. Here's the irony in all this. We went out of our way to get that reaction. We wanted parents to complain. It was part of the whole sales approach to the product. In our commercial, You even have parents saying, "Oh, these are horrible. These are disgusting." The kids say, "Oh no, they're great." Whatever. So we wanted some controversy. We actually, what we got was so little, it didn't really matter. But that angle, you just want just enough to make it say, "Oh, we got to have this. This is daring. This is ooh." Um,
Probably the difference between the 60s and the 80s, we're already getting so, I don't want to say numb, but we've seen it all.
Yeah, desensitized is the word, I think.
Oh, it's so different. I can tell you, it's a night and day difference because, and you think about it, it makes perfect sense. When this just belonged to us, it was special. We were special. We were the ones who championed these things that nobody else appreciated, and only a few of them existed, relatively speaking. So we could glow, take some pride in that, and each of them that exist, we saw every single one, and they loom so large for the rest of our lives. Today, everybody's into this, so it's not special anymore. I mean, if you see this Marvel movie or 2 Marvel movies before it or 3 Marvel movies after it, it won't equal a fraction of what the 7th Voyage of Sinbad did to people.
Amen to that.
Amen, certainly, especially with the Sinbad trilogy. There's not much magic like that to be found today.
It was something that wasn't around, and it was up to us to bring it back, which we did. And now it's passed us by. It's not like I don't really relate anymore, I mean, listen, I just turned 67, and what the hell? I'm an old guy now, right? But my relationship with the movies, especially fantasy films, growing up, entirely different. Now it just seems like it's desperate medicine that people take to make them happy, and it's trying to fill a hole that can never be filled, and there's something kind of sad about it. Maybe it's a comment on our times, but years ago it was so fulfilling, it was so different to be into this. Of course there were the negatives because you were a misfit, where the girls didn't now you got pretty fangirls who are into this. Man, I would have loved to have had that as a kid. Back then, the last thing in the world, oh my God, you'd be the ultimate nerd to show that you were interested in this. So, there are some good things with today's world. I'm waiting for a pretty fangirl to give me a call, let's get something going. He said on record, because the cops come and arrest him.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of Ray Harryhausen, do you have any particular favorite Ray Harryhausen movies and creatures / characters?
Yeah, first let me tell you about how I pissed off Ray Harryhausen. Ray was one of my gods as a kid. So what do you do when you first start writing is like, you start, you're a critic, you start browsing about everything. Well, I wrote a negative review of his film fantasy scrapbook, which was the first Ray Harryhausen book to ever come out. And we were expecting the world from this book. And it turns out to be this expensive special issue of Famous Monsters with stills we've seen a million times, and I'm going, this is what we're getting after all from the greatest guy who ever lived who did this kind of work. And that review ran in the Monster Times, and Ray was incensed. He wrote this huge article, letter to the Monster Times, which they printed, saying, "Oh, I think your qualities as a critic are in serious." Oh my God! Imagine you've grown up loving one of your gods, and then you piss them off this way. And Monster Times had a funny retort for it, which listen, we stand behind Gary Gerani, and we will defend him to his death. Okay, it took years for me to have the courage to make peace with Ray Harryhausen, which I did years later. I gave him Dinosaurs Attack, and I basically said, listen, it was so hysterical too. He remembered he remembered that I was. I guess very few people said bad things about Ray's work.
Of course he did.
And for years, like when my partner Mark Carducci was doing film journalism, he went to England. He actually interviewed Harryhausen, and Mark actually was brave enough to say, "Oh, by the way, I'm very good friends with Gary Gerani." And Ray's reaction was, "Oh, my estimation of you has gone down dramatically." So he held a grudge for a while, but when we got together, we laughed. It was great, and we were birds of a feather in terms of, oh no, they should drag their tails and they should stand upright. What can I say? But anyway, my favorite, I would say, the golden period for Ray Harryhausen started in 1958 with Seven Voyage of Sinbad. Yeah. Then you had Gulliver, Mysterious Island, Jason the Argonauts, and First Men in the Moon. Every single one of those movies is a classic. Ray and Charles Schneer proved they could play in the same playground as what Fox was doing with Journey to the Center of the Earth, what George Powell was doing with his movies, Time Machine. They could adapt Jules Verne. They could adapt Agent just as well as any. And again, they were kind of a smaller budgeted operation, but Ray was a genius. And those movies are great, not necessarily because of Ray Harryhausen, but because they were beautifully written and directed movies. Mysterious Island is directed by, was it Cy Enfield? Great director. So the human character interaction and the way those things are part of the fun as much as a giant crab is. So those, to me, that period is the golden period for the great Ray. Right after that, you're going downhill. Guanji is not a good movie. Forgetting about the animation. Just Guanji, all those, the Sinbad pictures are crap. Clash of the Titans, to me, is in that one, I don't even like his effects. I mean, the giant Kraken is a giant porcelain statue. I know he's turning to stone, but it just, you look at Jason, and you look at Talos, and you look at the conception and the way those scenes are shot, and then you look at Clash of the Titan, where they're clunky, and and they had money to play with. That was their big bid. So I don't care for that. To me, the films I mentioned, that is the magic hour, the magic period for Harryhausen. Now you go back to earlier, and out of all the black and whites, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is head over heels better than the three other black and white Columbias that he did. That was, Warner's picked that up and released it because Eugene Laurier directed The Beast. So The Beast is a beautifully shot, lit, edited movie, whereas, let's face it, Earth versus and they're not badly made, but they're not as good. Okay, so in terms of that black and white era, no question. I consider The Beast Eugene Laurier first and Ray Harryhausen second, even though obviously Ray Harryhausen's work on it is what we're thinking about. But again, it's the filmmaking. It's always, and Columbia with their cheesy, they were like people who worked on serials who directed those things. There was, there really wasn't much to it. When they upgraded, and all of a sudden, and I would say out of those classic color ones from that era, I would probably say Mysterious Island was probably the best film in the group, although they're all great. And First Men in the Moon, one hell of an interesting movie. And here's my point there too. Who wrote First Men? Nigel Neal, one of the greatest science fiction writers who ever lived, who created Quatermass and all this. So the aliens in First Men are almost like the Quatermass kind of invading aliens. It was a combination of Wells's vision and Nigel Neal's, which is just as strong in its own way. So that movie is beautifully written and a lot of ambiguity. What happens at the end? Was Cavor aware that they posed a threat to the Earth? He's the one who brought them Cavorite. With that, they could now come to the Earth and clean us up. They were a very efficient society. He gave them the way to create a preemptive strike against us, because sooner or later we would invade their world. So did he realize I have to stay here to clean up the milk that I spilled? The last time you see him, he's looking at the cavalry, and they're all around him. Was his cold deliberate? Did he save the earth deliberately? Or was he still clueless and it was just an accident? We really don't know. At the end of the picture, when Bedford's looking through the telescope and he's going, "You always did have such a guy," that's his happy wreck, because he knew they were invaders. He didn't trust them at all. But who knows what cavalry? What's beautiful is that it leaves that up to your imagination to figure it out. Some people say, "Oh no, Caver would never have wiped out a civilization." No. But then again, he did have a sense of, and he finally did realize, I put this power in their hands. So you don't really know. Great movie. That's my feeling.
Yep.
I haven't really seen First Man myself, but my personal favorite Sinbad films are the first two Sinbad films, Seventh Voyage, Golden Voyage, and first for Dinoflix, it is a Tolkien Guanxi 1 million years BC, but I'd probably say 1 million years BC was probably the tad better of the dinosaur films Harryhausen did.
Well, that was one hell of a great dinosaur movie. The thing that 1 million is kind of weird, because that wasn't one of his. That wasn't a Charles Schneer. It was almost like Hammer said, "Hey, could you come over and do us a favor and do our animation?" So that kind of stands a little separate from all of his regular Charles Schneer work. Now, I was a kid who grew up watching the original 1 million BC. Again, a $1 million movie every night of the week, right? You gotta love $1 million movie. And those were the giant lizards, which I loved. I had no problem with the giant lizards as a kid. I even bought Battle of the Giants, the 8mm Castle film. I had that scene. Now it was the same story, but with realistic dinosaurs, or dinosaurs that look like they're supposed to. So that was cool. And of course, you had Raquel Welch. So it was sort of an enjoyable guilty pleasure movie with some great Harryhausen special effects. You do know that that movie was supposed to have an additional sequence at the end that paralleled the original 1 million BC, where they're trapped in a cave by a dinosaur, and Tumac and his people have to come rescue them. And in the Harryhausen version, it was going to be a brontosaurus that trapped these people in a cave, and I've seen all the storyboards on that, but I don't even think that got to the filming stage. So the movie now ends just with the volcano and doesn't have that final set piece. But that was planned, is what they were going to do.
You have any thoughts on the other Hammer Dinosaur film that Jim Danforth did, When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth?
Well, to begin with, I fell in love with Victoria Vetri.
A lot of people did.
Beautiful woman in my life. It made perfect sense. Not only was she a Playboy Playmate, but she was a Playmate of the Year. Okay. So it was almost hard to look past her impressive physique to look at the effects, but I managed. And there was always this interesting thing with Danforth where he was always the other guy. I liked When Dinosaurs Were. I liked what he tried. I liked the elasmosaur, whatever it was at the beginning, what he did with the reflected fire on the animal. I liked the baby dinosaur. I thought that was a cute setup. He tried things. Not everything worked. I remember he even also tried to blur the wings of a pterodactyl. Like he to sort of, because to create the sense of whatever. And to some people, it just looked like a faulty effect. So he was daring enough to try some things, most of which worked, some of which didn't. And lo and behold, that movie was nominated for an Oscar. And Ray Harryhausen's work very rarely was, if ever. George Powell's things would and would occasionally win. So here you have Danforth being nominated for an Oscar, Best Special Effects. He lost to Bedknobs and Broomsticks. But Harryhausen must have gone, if he wins a friggin' Oscar and I'm the master of it, whatever. But anyway, he got as far as at least being nominated. And then the earlier stuff, Jack the Giant Killer. I'm trying to think of the non-Harryhausen animated movies of that sort. I saw Jack the Giant Killer in 1963 when it first came out. and I loved it. Of course, the ripoff factor was obvious. You had the same hero, you had the same villain, you pretty much had the same Cyclops, even though he wasn't a Cyclops. You had the horned John, with the cloven hooves. I mean, it was no wonder there was a lawsuit on that. But there's a case again. Boy, you look at that and you'll say this animation is nowhere near what Harryhausen could do. You give them credit for trying things and for going for it, right? And the optical effects in that movie are gorgeous. All the color filters and the witches doing things and whatever. I mean, it's like Disney. It's almost like a little touch of what's the Disney Darby O'Gill? Where the magical effects are just as impressive, or more impressive than the stop motion. But like I say, anything along these lines, we went to see. Equinox, we went to see. I mean, whatever it was, that's the difference between then and now.
I heard that Jim Danforth animated the Pegasus in Clash of the Titans. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't heard that.
I hadn't either until real recently.
The Pegasus looked quite good, as I recall. I mean, there were just certain things that I just felt your time is.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not.
This kind of thing. Post Star Wars, I remember Clash of the Titans came out the same year as Dragon Slayer, and there was
that was an amazing movie.
I mean, that blew away anything you saw in Clash of the Titans, and Certainly. It was kind of like. Meanwhile, Dragon Slayer bombed at the box office. The project did make money. The critics tore it apart, which is why Harryhausen retired. Years later now, every dreadful movie from that era is now considered a classic. So Ray eventually began to revise his view, because even he said, this ended my career. When the critics pinpointed how bad my effects were, it was like I knew it was over. But now, because people have embraced it more over the years, the way they embraced other movies that bombed so big, like the remake of Flash Gordon with Sam Jones is now the Queen of England. It's her favorite movie. I'm going, oh my God. I know, because so many of these things, I would take a chance doing trading card sets on for Topps, or I would recommend them. And when nobody bought Labyrinth because nobody went to see the movie, they blame me. Now it's, what a classic. Let's do a remake. But all that stuff, Little Shop of Horror, I was out there, and you didn't know ahead of time if a movie was going to click or not. So you just had to, when you took a license on Return to Oz, you had to hope that it was going to catch on in some way. Otherwise, you'd have trading cards sitting in a box on a candy counter and nobody in the universe buying them, right?
I want that.
I know. So it was tough picking and choosing.
Gary, did you go Don Glute over in Burbank? Are you friends with Don Glute in Burbank?
Oh, yeah. I'm friendly with Don. I'm not really good friends with Don, but I'm friendly with Don.
You guys are so much alike. Either you wouldn't get along or you really get along. I'm not sure which.
No. Actually, no, I'm kind of in the middle, because Don has connected with me a number of times over the years. We've had good conversation. I think he invited me over to one of his dinosaur soirees with girls and stuff like that, and I wasn't able to make it. So I have no reason to think that we wouldn't get along. And I'm sure he likes Dinosaurs Attack. That's my big contribution to the world of dinosaurs, I guess.
Well, he has an eye for the ladies too, as you see.
Well, listen, primitive. An impossibly beautiful girl who's supposed to be a primitive, I mean, it's like you see so much and it's so primal, you gotta react. Especially when Hammer was up, they got Raquel Welch and Victoria Vett. I mean, holy crap. By the way,
the size of your dinosaurs on your cards. Have you heard much about that? The size.
The fact that they're so big?
Like Dimetrodon especially.
That gigantic one?
Yeah.
Well.
Like,
the obvious answer is the bigger the better.
Yeah.
Why is King Kong small in some shots and gargantuan in other shots? Right?
Yeah.
It's even worse. It's supposed to be the same character. bigger. All this stuff is tapping into dream state. So I think you can take a tremendous leap here and do it. Specifically, though, Dinosaurs Attack being a parody. Remember I told you being a takeoff means you could do anything. Among the things that was a parody of very obviously, maybe the first obvious thing it's a parody of, are the posters to the dinosaur movies. That's why you have heads in corners screaming, just like the posters. And in those posters, whatever the dinosaur was, it was 1,000 times bigger, even than it appeared on the screen. So that had to be part of what I was doing. If I had to invent a science fiction explanation, giantism going through the time streams, there you go. Done. If you're going to accept any of this nonsense,
Right.
you know.
Might as well just run with it.
Exactly. The crazier, the better. Something like this.
You mentioned the original King Kong. Obviously, there were scenes that they cut out because it was just too much for people's minds back in those days. Once again,
The spider pit
how we've
sequence.
changed over the years. You know, if we were to take The Exorcist and show it to people in the 30s, their heads would explode. I mean,
Yeah.
Their heads turn around, yeah. Oh yeah, no. Listen, I was a kid who grew up with Kong in its edited form, and then what was it in the very late '60s? I think when they found that additional footage which had him undressing Fay Ray and that additional footage, stomping on the natives, putting them in his mouth, and all that stuff, which did change the character a little. He was nastier that way, but ultimately they just kind of fit seamlessly into the picture again, and they don't really change the movie.
yeah.
The spider pit sequence, God knows, that's probably gone forever.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Although we do have
that's.
Peter Jackson's recreation of it, which is
I do have that.
I've
That's
seen that. It's pretty good. That's how I envisioned it happening.
You got to give him credit. He had all the money in the world.
Oh yeah.
Fanboy, just like us. So
Yep.
what's the use of this money? As long as I'm doing a King Kong, let me fucking do let me do the original scene that's missing too. I mean, that's you gotta give the guy credit.
That's devotion. And doing it the exact way it would have been done by O'Brien and company.
Yeah, really trying to follow it, because those models turned up in the Black Scorpion, the
They did.
spider thing that chases the kid. Yeah, all that's from in the pit. So yeah, they had enough to work with that they could recreate them. Cool.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg. Ask a question.
Oh, I'm trying to think of something here. There was another stop motion dino film from the late '70s that's also gotten a cult following over the years. It was a Planet of Dinosaurs. It's a film that I've kind of enjoyed, but I recognize how awful it is. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I saw that on TV, I remember, for the first time. And they did a little homage to the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in that. I think we have a Rhedosaurus coming over.
Yep, a small one.
So I saw it once and, got with it. It was like a Land of the Lost level kind of thing. And, I'm sure the people who made it loved what they were doing, and God bless,
Yeah, that's Churkus who did the special effects, and he passed away a few years ago, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
In our defense.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was looking to do a Planet Dinosaur special a while back with Jim L. Pearl. That's going to be tabled for another time. But regarding the Rhedosaurus' appearance in that film, I think I heard a story once. I think maybe from Jim L. Pearl, the producer, that Harryhausen actually visited the set of Planet of Dinosaurs and gave them their blessing to include his creation for that sequence where it battles the Tyrannosaur.
How cool is that? How cool is that? I was always thinking, why didn't Ray Bradbury, when he was doing Ray Bradbury Theater, and Ray Harryhausen was still alive, say, hey, let's do an adaptation of The Foghorn, and wait, can we use the beast design? Who's going to care, right? Let's do it. They should have done it. I mean, that's one of his famous stories, and I don't think he ever did an adaptation on Ray Bradbury. He should have gotten together with Ray.
Yeah, the Sound of Thunder film wasn't all that good from what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you give people credit for even trying, and you feel their pain when you know they're trying to make things work that they just can't make work, and you try to go along with it and enjoy the other aspects of it that are well done, and saying, okay, their hearts are in the right place.
Now, there's this other topic that's become of interest to me over the past couple of years, and that's been unmade or lost film projects. And there's been a huge number of those within, Godzilla films and other sort of monster and dinosaur films. Are there any particular lost film projects, be it past or present, that you would hopefully like to, see be made someday?
Well, when I was a kid, and once again, this is tapping into my hormones at that age, but I was always annoyed that we never got the announced sequel to Barbarella. Barbarella Goes Down, which was, incredibly enough, originally announced in the trades and whatever. And okay, so that never happened. But in terms of monster movies, I'm trying to think of the ones that, if there were some really interesting things or sequels. Well, we don't have to go any further than Gorgo. Those two dinosaurs are going out to sea. They're still alive. The Gorgo comic book gave you a sequel to Gorgo every 2 months. So that's how I got my Gorgo sequels, all right? It's so funny. Yeah, Charlton Comics had done Gorgo and Conga and Reptilicus as comic book. So if you didn't get sequels, you at least got comic book versions. It was really ahead of their time.
Off the top of my head, there are several unmade projects that I would have loved to have seen gotten made, but they never got the chance to. Two of these were unmade Loch Ness Monster films. There was a Toho Hammer collaboration from the 70s that I did a whole panel on it at G-Fest last summer. And then there's also... thank you. And then there's also the John Sayles screenplay, The Sea Dragon of Loch Ness, which was coming out around the Hammer version was in its death throes.
Well... Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. This is what we were just talking about before. Now we're living in an age where aren't there probably like 20 different Loch Ness Monsters movies out that they haven't even seen? I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised. You can't keep track of this stuff, and it doesn't resonate. So, Lord only knows if you want to lie. Wasn't there some fairly... it wasn't Loch Ness, it was another sea serpent movie that was kind of a
Shape of Water or something.
Oh, Water Horse. That was 05, but that was
I remember thinking, I had my own Loch Ness story where the kicker was, you can never get a clear photo. They finally do get a clear photo because it's a spirit photographer, and what the Loch Ness Monster really is the ghost of a plesiosaur who used to inhabit that lake, and he's there because his ghost reminds us of the species that used to own our Earth ages ago. So that finale was like, whoa, a Rod Serling like twist ending. But there may be some great Loch Ness movies out there that we haven't even seen. Same thing with Yeti movies, and God knows, right? Another thing, I always wanted to do a movie based on the Wendigo monster, which is a great kind of monster. It's like a more interesting werewolf. I understand they've done a few. I guess they're out there. I should look them up.
I have seen some Wendigo films out there. My favorite Wendigo film I've seen is that one from Troma Pictures called Frostbiter that came out in the 90s. It was released in the 80s, made in the 80s to be more technical.
Wow. Well, let me tell you about the cheapest but the most amazing thing I saw, which was the TV adaptation of the Wendigo, which was done live TV, I believe, in a series called Great Ghost Stories, Great Ghost Tales on NBC in color around the same year that Way Out came out, right before the Twilight Zone. So we're talking early 60s. And this was like a summer replacement series where they did these half-hour shot-on-video adaptations of classic scary tales. And the Wendigo was one of them. And I don't know if you've ever read the original Algernon Blackwood story of the Wendigo, which is a classic horror story. Algernon Blackwood also wrote the Willows or whatever. He's which was about the trees coming to life, and I mean, his sense of the environment being alien to you and dangerous to you. He's a fantastic horror writer. Anyway, the Wendigo is one of the scariest stories, and that's just basically a few people out in the iciness in Canada or whatever at a campfire, and one of them comes over, and he's been lost for years, and he was captured by a Wendigo, and he's turning into one. And at the end of the scene, they look and they're by a fire out there in the ice or whatever, and they say, look at his feet. And his feet are clawed creature feet and all that. And in the TV version I'm talking about, guess who plays the Wendigo? Walter Matthau. And he's great. He comes and he's saying, you really have to like traveling though, because the thing grabbed him and with its wings took him over the trees. You know, it's all this sick stuff. So you can see that only if you go to the Paley Museum, you know, where they have it on file and you can check it out. And it's just an amazing little, no money at all, just a couple of actors, but very, very effective. I don't even think they made the feet. They just look. I don't think you really see anything. But you don't have to. You know, your imagination is doing the work.
Well, that's true. Do you have a favorite Twilight Zone or Outer Limits?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, we'll get into that in a second.
I'm sorry.
We're still on getting back to dinosaurs. Just so you know, a kid of my age, my earliest experience with dinosaurs, I was just thinking about this the other day. The movie Dinosaurs on one side of the fence, but I would say Christmas 1959, under my tree, was the Marx dinosaur blister card.
Yes,
with
right.
Dinosaurs and the whatever.
I'm very familiar.
That was like, okay, ground zero for all of us, right? My mom had snuck out the Allosaur from it and gave that to me a week before as a little teaser. And then that morning, there was all, including that great Tyrannosaur, right? And I was in seventh heaven. And here I am just having, what did it cost? $1? I mean, it was like, these things were nothing back then. And then I've been like, after 10 minutes of, my mom said, oh, but you didn't notice what was behind the tree. There's something else. There was this flat box wrapped up, and I opened up the wrapping. It was the skeleton of the Tyrannosaurus, the plastic that ITC did.
Yeah.
And I had been to the Museum of Natural History. I had seen the real thing. And the idea of having my own, if the Marx dinosaurs hadn't put me over the top that morning, that really did it. Of course, my dad was going to have to use the glue and put it together.
I was going to say.
But nevertheless, so those are my earliest experiences with the real thing. Okay. And my mother began to get a little like, gee, you're getting more of an interest in these movie monsters rather than I thought the science and all that was kind of more wholesome. But all right, you could like Godzilla too.
It's funny. I thought an obvious transition from the Mars attacks to a similar type set of cards would be like a monsters attack, which you said you had thought of that already. So that's kind of funny.
I called it the Colossals.
Right, the Colossal.
And I had, interestingly enough, neither Len Brown or Woody Gelman at Topps were familiar at all with Lovecraft. So they didn't understand. They understood giant monsters attacking, but those monsters had to be either created by scientists or prehistoric, whatever. The idea of the combination of supernatural Cthulhu, they didn't know what, they just thought, you can't combine science fiction with horror. Who's this Lovecraft guy? So even though they liked the drawings, they probably, that particular take, and I thought the Lovecraft, because Lovecraft was becoming hipper, and more and more people were getting into it in the 70s, I thought that gave it a slightly different feel, and that would just be cool because now I could do supernatural stuff along with the giant monsters. But they didn't get it. They didn't understand Lovecraft. So first they said these things won't sell no matter what it is. It's a Mars Attack sequel or whatever, and who knows who this Lovecraft guy is. By the time the dinosaur fad of the 80s came along, that's when they had a totally different attitude.
Yeah.
My dog is so
Right.
thrilled.
Oh, I don't think I could come up with one, but could you come up with a favorite Twilight Zone and Outer Limits?
Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. Yeah, there's so many great
Exactly.
so many great Outer Limits, right? So usually it's more like, what are your top 5? You know? But I would say Twilight Zone, and again, I was there when the show premiered, so I got it. My crazy parents just let me stay at 10 o'clock to watch these spooky shows, but that's a lot of parents are wonderful that way. Probably Eye of the Beholder would be the one that made the greatest impression, because once you see those incredibly ugly faces at the end, you never forget that. Now I could remember, even as we were watching it for the first time it was broadcast, my mom, once again, said, I think you're going to see that all the other people are funny looking.
Yeah.
Because they're never showing them to you.
Right.
Always in shadow or whatever. And I said, oh my God, you're right. I kept saying, oh no, they're showing. No, that's in shadow. Oh my, you know. So I wonder if how many people kind of guessed it, because why were they filming it that way?
Yeah.
You know, years later, I was in a group of people I was saying as a film. I said, well, you know what I would have done as a writer? I would have thrown in a separate line that she says, like, and being in these bandages, it's like I'm in my private world of darkness, which was the alternate title for the other, and it's like none of you have faces. You're just voices, you're whatever. And then, oh, okay, so that's why they're not showing us. It's her point of view. It's psychological. Oh, okay. So that would have helped to camouflage the fact that they were deliberately hiding what everybody looked like. We could have played off that, but no, that wasn't done. So it was a little obvious that they were setting you up for something. But nevertheless, classic episode. In terms of the one that had the greatest emotional impact would probably be the one with Gig Young, where he goes back to his old hometown. And they did a couple like that.
Yeah.
There was a stop at Willoughby, and then this was Walking Distance.
Right.
Within the first 8 or 12 episodes of the show, it was fairly early on. And it's a beautiful episode with a magnificent Bernard Herrmann score. You know, I've done commentaries for like about 20 or so Outer Limits, Twilight Zone episodes. So if you have the Blu-ray, you could hear me talking about The Lonely, the Jack Warden episode where he has the robot as a companion. And I mentioned how my late cousin had come up with an alternate ending. Instead of her being shot at the end, which is kind of shocking and sad and terrible, it could have even been worse. They could have just grabbed him and taken him away, and she's left all by herself.
Yeah, right. That'd be even
She
worse.
is the lonely. And the last shot could have been her tear, which is something that was set up earlier in the episode. And that chokes me up just thinking of my cousin's ending, which really would have been sad, which would have driven that home so strongly. But it's sad enough as it is. As I was doing the commentary, I had to fight myself from crying. Because when you do a commentary, you're living through every inch of the story as it's happening, and you're trying to get into and explain to people. So it's working on you. I hear my voice beginning to cry. I say, holy crap.
Yeah.
And in terms of other great ones, here's an interesting point. Here's a way to really narrow it down. What's your favorite Twilight Zone episode of the hour episodes?
Yeah, right.
17 of those, right? Or 18 if you count the original William
Well,
Bendix.
if you talk about the most scary, I would have to say the Living Doll, you know, and also the Gremlin on the Wing, you know. But of the hour ones, the Museum of Murder scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, you know. The Wax Museum.
That Are you thinking of the Martin Balsam episode where he's got the wax figures of all these famous murderers?
Yes.
But he's the one who, yeah, that was an hour episode, interestingly. In terms of the scariest ones, well, the Gremlin on the Wing, Nightmare 20,000, when he pulls the curtain away and you see that face,
Yeah.
the entire neighborhood screamed. I'm telling you, you could hear screaming. That happened only one other time in an episode of Thriller. When Harry Towns looks in the mirror and puts the cheaters together, which reveal what you really are, and all of a sudden his face turns into the most horrible monster face you could imagine. Again, the whole neighborhood screamed. And like you could hear the screams coming. This is the difference between now and then. There was almost neighborhood involvement.
Yeah, right.
We're all watching the same shows. There are only a few things to watch, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
But those were, and you know something? We haven't even gotten to Outer Limits yet, but Twilight Zone probably scared me more than Outer Limits because monsters were my friends. Yeah. So Galaxy Beam was just a neat looking monster. He didn't scare me. But an old lady living in the middle of nowhere who gets a phone call in the middle of the night, where just getting a phone call in the middle of the night if you're an old lady living in the middle is scary, right? And it's, hello? Yeah. Hello? Who is this? Who is this? That's scarier than 10 Outer Limits monsters put together.
Yeah.
That said, I love the Outer Limits. The Outer Limits is my favorite of all of those at the time. And the Twilight Zone is what can one say? Twilight Zone is the Twilight Zone. Yeah. But Outer Limits, that was really an answer to what us monster kids wanted. Sure. What was happening in the early 60s is that was the first time there was a classic monster craze, brought about by famous monsters, brought about by shock theater, which was all the classic Universal horror movies being shown on TV. That started in 1957. By the time we got into the early 60s, it was really taking hold. Famous monsters, the Aurora Monster Kid. All of a sudden, Hollywood began to notice that classic style monsters were selling. Universal was selling licenses. They never sold a license on The Creature from the Black Lagoon ever. Now they were getting merchandising and license. What's going on here? Mm-hmm. So all the studios decided there was this whole thing going on. Monsters were a big thing. That's why the Munsters came into existence. And the Outer Limits was the most dramatic answer to that. And that's why they made sure they had a monster in every episode just about. And believe me, I've explored the Outer Limits because I've written books and done, and again, a gazillion commentaries for the Blu-ray on that as well. And I can tell you that there are so many theories about the monster of the week. One of them is that United Artists TV, which financed the Outer Limits, was doing very, very well, taking their 1950s science fiction, It the Terror from Beyond, all that stuff, putting them into packages, selling them to Chilla Theater, creature feature type things across the country. And of course, let's produce our own new series of monster movies that will put into syndication immediately. Outer Limits went into syndication the same year it was still on the network. The show was canceled mid-season. A month after that, it's in local TV stations. So they couldn't wait to put out their new package of monster movies. So there's another reason why Outer Limits may have a monster, because you may have said the best kinds of movies of this sort are the ones that have monsters. Make sure there's a monster. A lot of theories about where that came from. ABC insisted on all that, but it was in the air. Kids were into monsters, and the Outer Limits was the first serious attempt. Even as a kid, I said, man, they love monsters even more than I do. Every friggin' week we got one. After the Galaxy Beam premiere, I thought, probably going to be 6 months before I see another monster on the Outer Limits. And then the second episode, didn't it? It was the one about the Manchurian Candidate kind of an idea. So I said, it's probably going to be forever. And then sure enough, next week we have another monstrosity. And then every week, and I said, well, maybe they're overdoing it a little. But now when I look...
monsters?
Now that I look back at it, and in the 1970s, a whole bunch of us, David Scow, just a whole bunch, Ted Rydell, we were all determined to bring back the Outer Limits. I contacted Joe Stefano. I went to his house. I began to write articles about it. I brought him to New York for a convention, a Telefantasy convention. I hosted him in an interview on that. Our goal was, enough of the Star Trek lives, because that was the big Star Trek revival period in the mid-70s. What about the Outer Limits, which in a sense was an even more interesting show? And the more you got into it, I was, oh my God, this show is shot by Conrad Hall, one of the greatest cinematographers who ever lived in the history of planet Earth. Thank you. Which is why some of the shows that he shot look like nothing you ever saw on television before or since. I mean, just amazing work. And then the whole idea that Joe Stefano, it was all of he was going through analysis, and all of those stories were his id gone berserk. So a lot of the storylines don't catch you the same way the Twilight Zone, which are little moral tales. You are just like a psychiatrist, and he was on the couch, and Conrad Hall was shooting his dreams. And this is what, so you look at and you listen to those shows and you watch them, and you begin to think there was never anything on TV quite like this that had all of that going for it. Mm-hmm. Probably my favorite episode of The Outer Limits was the last one, which was a pilot for a different show, The Forms of Things Unknown, which was a pilot for another anthology that Stefano was trying to set up. Again, shot by Conrad Hall, music by Dominic Frontieri. But that last episode didn't have a mouse. That's the one with David McCallum with all the clocks and all of that. Yeah. But look at the stylization of that film. It's just brilliant. Mm-hmm. And of course, we crazy Outer Limits experts, if you will, are always looking for new things. It just turned out that we found a Joseph Stefano script that was an earlier version of The Forms of Things Unknown with a monster in it. Thank you. It was called The Thing Unknown. It had wings, it had talons, it was unstuck in time. David McCallum's Tone Hobart was its keeper. It's like, oh my God. So now we're trying to get David McCallum to do a reading of that script that was just discovered. Yeah. Having artists doing the alien. So those of us who are into Outer Limits you're talking about total obsession.
Yeah. Very good. Great, Greg.
Oh, right. I had a few things I want to mention here. One, first off, my fellow teammates over at the Primitive War creative team all say hi, and the author Ethan wanted you to know he's a big fan of your work on Dinosaurs Attack.
Thank you so much.
And yep. And
it always makes me feel good when people like anything that I've done. You know, I mean, it's like that's the nicest thing anyone could say to me. Really, I appreciate it.
And just for if there was to be a sequel, a Dinosaurs Attack sequel series, what sort of new dinosaurs or prehistoric monsters would you like to potentially include if you were to do a revival or sequel series to Dinosaurs Attack?
Way back when, like I say, I was coming up. I only did X amount of them before they just said, pull the plug. You can't spend more money on this because the first one isn't selling the way we expected it to. But that one involved the time streams. Even though we sent them back, they were now unstuck all through human history. So we had an ongoing new storyline. I had this laboratory that was right by a cliffside with smashing waves and all that. And it was sending up electrical things into the sky and tapping into the time. I don't know, something like that. And so we had, and then I think the gimmick was the daughter of Elias Thorne. You gotta remember, it was him and his wife, and they were competing scientists, and she ultimately is right, okay? But they had a child named Alice, and one of the little stories was the little girl and her girl, whatever, in a Home Alone thing fighting off dog. That was in the graphic novel. It's briefly in the cards. So this storyline, I think, was continuing with the Thorne family. I think now his daughter was older, and I don't remember exactly what was going on. But there was a moving forward storyline that did have the dinosaur devil god still in the woodwork, and the unstuck in time angle, so we could have images like the Titanic being destroyed by a dinosaur and all this other kind of stuff, which opened up, history was changed and this was that, and you could really go nuts with that. If I was going to do a sequel, well, I wouldn't do a sequel now. I would do the first one again, but But if someone, it really would depend on who asked me to do it and what the venue was. Somebody wanted a trading card painted series as some kind of sequel to Dinosaurs Attack. I'd have to do some thinking about that. Either I would want to be just like a continuation because that's what I feel people might want, the nostalgia, or I might say, no. Let's be completely fresh and contemporary, but try to find a new way to sort of capture that. Someone should send me some money and get me started. I'll figure it out.
Someone should send me money too. In the Dinosaurs Attacks, they're sending everybody back to their original time. Well, and some of the dinosaurs were ripping up, of course, but some of them were not. So what you do is just say that some of them didn't make it all the way back to the Mesozoic. Some of them went back to 1912, and 1865.
They were caught in what I call the time streams.
Yeah.
And that meant you could do anything, It's always, you got to always think of something that enables you to open it up for great visual concepts. Those are the demands of a trading card set. If you do a movie, you always have to be visual as well, but, you have other considerations. But yeah, no, and I know I had them playing with the times. I had another act. Actually, I think I had sabotage or something going on. I didn't just want to repeat the same thing. But oh God, talk about a story that I started developing and then it just kind of went away. Even the art I had done from it, when it wound up in the graphic novel, I don't know if those concepts were the same anymore. I think I did print that one with the Titanic, though. I must have said something about it.
What happened to your original drawings for the Dinosaurs Attacks? Any of those still around?
I know where all the originals are. They were given to me. They were mine. They're in a safe place now. Scans were supposedly made on every single one, right? And one or two were missing for whatever reason. Okay. Now, I'm currently writing a series of books called the Card King Chronicles. Volume 1, the 70s, Volume 2, the 80s, etc. I've created hundreds and hundreds of products along these lines. And I myself can't even remember all of them. So before my brain cells completely disappear, I figured, let me try to track every friggin' thing I ever did and do several books. Luckily, the products that were actually released, there are records of that. This isn't counting the other 50% of the, you gotta remember, I was on staff 9 to 5 every day. They're not gonna pay you if you're not doing work. So when I'm not working on things that actually saw the light of day, I was working on a ton of projects that never saw the light of day. So part of the challenge in writing my creative memoirs along these lines is remembering the things that, we developed and never did. Okay, part of that thing with the Colossals, that was a perfect example of that. And there were many, many other things. So I'm trying to really push that out. When we get to Dinosaurs Attack, I have everything on Dinosaurs. I have every inch of what was done on that, every scrap. So I could put together the ultimate Making of Dinosaurs Attack book that, if for no other reason, anatomy of a trading card series, how it begins, how it works, how everything is designed, the little blood splot that you put the number in. I had Art Spiegelman design that. Every step of the way, there's something interesting to say and to show.
Yeah, so please do make that book.
Well, something, what I'm planning on doing is Card King Chronicles Volume 1, the 70s, Card King Chronicles Volume 2, the 80s, Card King Chronicles Volume 3, Making Dinosaurs Attack.
Perfect.
That whole book will just be, because it's part of a series now, so it's not like I'm taking one property. This is just what I'm focusing on. I have a good relationship with Topps. They pretty much give me the blessing. This isn't, what do they care, right? Really. I'm hoping to do that. And that would go just up to present day. There'd be 5 volumes, because then after that it would be, the 70s, 80s, Creating Dinosaurs Attack, the 90s, and then the new century, the last 20 years, okay, which would cover the hundreds and hundreds of products, which are not only trading card sets. Things I completely forgot that I did. Oh, crap. All right, all right.
You better get busy.
No, it's been an amazing. I finished the first one, which was the 70s, and I'm going, completely forgot about this. But I did something called Drax Snacks, which were funny monsters. And to make it a little more interesting, instead of just writing copy, I wrote poems for each of them. I've been out of my mind. I remember, beware the man whose name is Fred. The rumor is he's lost his head. It's like a guy carrying his head around with his head cut off. I mean, things that, holy crap. I guess it kept me busy. I had to earn my paycheck, right?
Good.
But you know something? The fact that kids got this stuff and loved it,
Yeah.
it means so much to me, because when I was a kid, these things saved my life. They made me happy. They gave me an escape. And it's the same thing with the books. When I was a kid, the very first book on horror movies ever written was Carlos Claren's An Illustrated History of the Horror Film. And I remember when I got that, it was like, oh my God, it made my life so much happier. So when I did Fantastic Television years later, which is the first book on TV, science fiction, horror, or whatever, I felt I was doing the same thing for kids who were like me, lonely kid, whatever, who needed something like this to put a smile on their face. So I kind of feel like, at the very least, I kind of did that, And maybe I didn't hit the heights with the movie scripts and everything else I wanted to do, but I did make a lot of kids happy.
Yeah.
What the heck? Something.
I have Fantastic Television, and I did not know. I'm going to have to dig that out and look that over again, because I have that book.
Oh yeah, no, I'm known for three things: for all the Tops works, for Fantastic Television, for Pumpkinhead. Those are usually the things that people ask me about.
Yep.
I've done other things, but those seem to be the ones that resonated.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Is there any stories that you could possibly share with us about the production process of the graphic novel that may not be as well known to the public?
All I'll say is, I started doing the graphic novel with Eclipse a million years ago, back in the 90s or early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, right after we did the cards. They wanted to do a comic. But that only went to the one issue. So I had all this stuff developed and lettered and done whatever, but they didn't, So years later, with IDW, and they had this relationship with Topps, they said, we know you had done all that. Do you want to? I said, sure, yeah, it'd be great to see the light of day. So I basically had to pull it together, but it wasn't even finished. A lot of it was finished, but a lot of it wasn't. So I had to, in a makeshift way, kind of pull it together. I'm not sure it worked entirely. So it was a bit of a makeshift process, but hey, a lot of great dino art was in there. And I think the story, I noticed recently that there were a few awkward bits in the storytelling because you were just kind of makeshifting it a little. But it's still Dinosaurs Attack. I mean, it still basically covers that story. And, a lot of dinosaur paintings. And this main thing that audience really wants anyway. So that's what I would say. It was kind of difficult pulling all this stuff together and trying to make it work, okay, when it had never been finished off properly originally. But I think we kind of pulled it off.
And what can I say? It's one of my favorite graphic novels that I have in my collection.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That's great. And all those goddamn issues of the comic that they put out, too, it's like, to me, I was like, you could just put out the graphic novel. Why do you have to put out but that's part of it. And that became collectible. It's all right. You have some different art on the covers. Although the graphic novel has all the beautiful art, I think, on the back of the book for all the covers of those comics anyway. But okay, as long as... And then I glanced at what Topps was doing. They changed my mythology. They gave Elias Thorne a son. He only had a daughter when I created it, but okay, he had another kid. Oh no, he died. How could he have another kid? But so it's weird. I'm legally the creator of Dinosaurs Attack, although it was a work for hire. Topps owns it, but they've given me that credit in the graphic novel and in a few other places, more so than they did with other people, and I do appreciate that. But they can do whatever they want with it. And I've just seen a little of the dinosaurs attacking the Martians. Looks kind of fun. Like I said, that was an idea I had proposed a gazillion years ago. They probably thought, "Oh, you just want to piggyback on Mars attacks with dinosaurs." Maybe. Anyway, they decided to do it themselves. So what can I say?
There's only about 9 cards, I think. It wasn't
That was like a kind of a
subset.
gimmick. Or whatever it was enough that they sent me things to sign, which is what caused that confusion.
Yeah.
Just looking at page 38 of the graphic novel, when the T-Rex makes its first appearance and it eats that cop, was this scripted to be an homage to that same scene from 20,000 Fathoms where the Retrosaurs devoured that cop down that New York street?
It's too obvious a ripoff. That's where
a tribute, a homage.
I know, but usually, what you do when you rip something off is you add a little something to it. So it's clearly you're doing that, but you're winking and saying, but we're aware of it. Right. In this case, it was just it. Right. I mean, it was the same damn thing, right? But I think everybody got a kick out of it. What's fun is it wasn't like a cop giving a ticket, but all of a sudden this beautiful Technicolor blue-shaped thing is sparkling into existence, and it's a giant Rex. And the next thing we know, we have the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms moment. Okay. Why not? And there's a lot of crack in the world in this too. As a matter of fact, this is funny. If you look at the movie Crack in the World, look at the last shot in the movie. The last shot in the movie I emulated at the end of Dinosaurs Attack. I picking yourselves up in a wrecked world in this horizon with silhouettes and all of that, right? Well, as it turns out, Tim Burton did that finale, but added Tom Jones. But he had that whole, there's still life here. Look at the little squirrel that came out of the ground. And life goes on. And then of course Tom Jones is singing. Well, that's the third generation parody, because the first level or the first appearance is in Crack of the World. I did the takeoff in Dinosaurs Attack, and then Tim Burton, who had optioned Dinosaurs Attack, used it for the ending of Mars Attacks. So I'm sort of trying to keep track of all of these connections, right? And there are other ones too, all through it.
Yeah. A tribute.
Yeah, gotta look at it that way.
Yeah.
I better, right? Otherwise I'd be in big league. Right. Although Warner Brothers, it's so crazy. Isn't Warner Brothers doing the releasing and legendary? Is it like all these Godzilla, Kong of Skull Island, and all of it? That's all legendary, I think, or whatever, or whoever does it, and then it's Warner's who ultimately releases those movies.
Okay.
So if they wanted to, they could do everything I did with Mars Attacks right there. They have all the Japanese kaiju. They have all the Warner Brothers dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The Beast, the Giant Behemoth, which is Allied Artbox, which Warner's owns. They could put all those characters, Guanji, they could put them all in there. Gorgo is public domain. You could throw him in there too. So they could do their own Dinosaurs Attacks if they want. They've got it. They don't even need to. They won't have Elias Thorne and gods, dinosaur gods in it. Right. But they do have a lot of monster dinosaur characters that Warner's owns, and if they wanted to, they could do their own Destroy All Monsters and go crazy.
Yeah.
And it's to the power of parody that, Godzilla and Godzilla Souls of the Classic Monsters were able to be featured in there without you getting potentially copyright shot down by Toho and some of the other IP holders.
Yeah, Toho is insane. Toho is
Oh,
crazy.
I've
When I
heard
was
the
in,
stories.
when I was among my other questionable achievements. I was the editor in chief of Xena Warrior Princess magazine for about 10 issues, and at one point they had a monster in the Xena episode that looked very much like Ghidra. And I wanted to run a photo of Ghidra, just as a comparison, just sort of, for obvious reasons, just saying, yeah, this kind of thing we've seen. Because it was a licensed magazine, the Xena magazine was licensed from Universal, you had to be very careful. Everything had to be legally approved. So Toho said, no way are we going to let you do that. Now, if this was just a monster magazine, I would, no problem. You put your photo in and no one's going to complain. But with a licensed magazine, same thing happened when Marvel licensed Planet of the Apes. They couldn't run Charlton Heston pictures. Meanwhile, all the monster magazines are running tons of with tons of Charlton Heston photos. And they say, we're paying you money, and we can't run what they're running for free? Yeah, it has to be legally cleared. If he hasn't cleared it, you can't do it. So that's interesting how that worked. So I that was my one run-in with Toho, where they were so intolerant.
And they are still difficult to work with to this day, Gary.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I had another problem with them years later at IDW. They asked me to, at some point I was writing some Godzilla original stories for them, and I don't know. I had one story where I went back to the Oxygen Destroyer, or I don't know what I did exactly, but I tapped into some of the original ideas, and they said, no, Toho will not let you can't do this, you can't do that. And at one point I had psychic powers or something. No, that is not allowed in the Toho universe. You can't do that. Excuse me, don't the little fairies communicate with Mothra?
Yeah, the Shobijin, you had Mickey Sagusa.
Excuse me. So I realized, okay, it's impossible here. They're really, you got to really work within their parameters.
Yes, I actually know some of the guys that worked on those comics. Actually, they shared some of their stories with me.
Yeah. Life is too short, you have a passion for something, you're going to fight for it. That goes without saying. But after a while, so those are my big Toho stories. Although my other big connection to this, of course, you realize I was Godzilla for the Monster Times. I was the Big G, and every month I would write a column. Oh, boys and girls, that went on for a while. And they used to send, the kids used to send in letters to the Big G. And I come in every week and read them, and provide little answers. And then eventually Godzilla ran for president through the Monster Times, I think. I remember vaguely. And Joe Kane wrote a very funny political satire piece about that. But yeah, my name was Gary Gerani, and I was the Big G at the Monster Times. That's what I got for writing such a well-received article on the creatures past, right? So they started having me become all these monsters, which was fun. What could be more fun for a monster kid than to actually become some of your favorite monsters? Oh, we're a sick group.
Yeah. There's that other Japanese giant monster just got an awesome big complete Blu-ray release from Arrow recently, Gamera. That's really that was hugely popular. I just rewatched that whole series. What's been your experiences regarding Gamera specifically, growing up and whatnot?
I'd seen the original Gamera, where I think they spelled his name with only one N, and that was the black and white original movie that Brian Donlevy was the American star that they worked into it. And I remember thinking at the time, it's just kind of an imitation Godzilla. They've done some good ones years later. From what I recall, they were forcing the Godzilla people to polish their shoes a little because they were doing some good work. The Gamera, by the time Gamera came along, and then he really became kind of a kid. he was always with kids.
Yes, the original creator, always envisioned him as being, a friend of all children sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, it had more in common with Astro Boy than it did with Godzilla in some ways. And by the way, I loved Astro Boy and Kimber the White Lion. I was a kid when those things came on, and Osamu Tezuka's approach to animation. We didn't even know they were Japanese when we were kids. But those things were beautiful. Those cartoons are wonderful. They're beautifully done, and they go right to the heart. They have characters you care about. I used to always be, oh God, poor Astro Boy, what he's going through. I never felt that way about Bugs Bunny. I mean, it was totally different.
Well, I was
Kill the rabbit.
making phone calls all day.
Now, if I had to choose my standout Gamera films, it would definitely be Gamera versus Baragon versus Gauss, and Shusuke Kaneko is a magnanimous, trilogy of films from the 1990s.
That really good one. Was Gauss the one that used to like slice off? He'd shoot something out and slice.
Yes, Gauss was Gamera's arch enemy with the sonic cutter beam that could slice and dice.
Wasn't it a Gamera movie too, where they're showing kids some films? There's all this disgusting stuff, like worms, and kids are like, ah.
Yes, those Showa Gamera films were surprisingly bloody. That was, to show that these monsters weren't anthropomorphic as much as the Toho monsters were. They were to be like animals when they fought.
Well, when I joined the Monster Times, when I started working for them, first special line in the early 70s, Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, they actually sent me the premiere of that, so to speak, and we interviewed Mr. Tanaka, who was here promoting it. We had an interpreter. That was really crazy, trying to explain what I was to them, which must have been completely confused. But I remember thinking at that time, this is not the Godzilla I fell in love with. I mean, I'm a Gojira guy. I want Godzilla to be the ultimate nightmare. The way he looks in the first movie, sort of scared. Like I said, monsters are my friends, but I was really little when I saw that on TV for the first time. And I could remember being scared. I could remember my mother going downstairs to hang clothes or something, and I was alone watching the TV, and I had to run downstairs because I was scared. Because the black and white somber aspects of it got to you. And he never looked better than he did in that first film. Yeah. Even by the time they got to Gigantus, it was just one movie away, he started looking a little goofy.
Yeah, the design work on the original Shodai Goji suit, the scales, the way they look, that was intentionally designed to look like the actual keloid scars of actual survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings.
Oh, yeah. And in God, is it my top 100 sci-fi movies? And Godzilla is in there. I printed the drawing of his head that was meant to look like a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, one of the concept art pieces.
Yeah. I mean, how interesting is all that? That's my Godzilla. By the way, a little trivia question that some people have raised, and I don't know the answer to, but you guys are the Godzilla experts. You can look into it. A friend of mine has told me that he's convinced that at the beginning of Gigantus the Fire Monster, when we first see Gigantus fighting Anguillus or whatever in the mountain area there with the two pilots see him, that in that scene, and in that scene alone, the Godzilla costume is the Gojira costume. And it happened. It's cut. The cutting is very fast. Okay, I'm gonna have to freeze a frame and try to study it. It's hard to tell because it goes by very, very quickly. But that led to a theory that, and then what happened when the two monsters drop into the ocean, the suit might have got waterlogged or whatever it was, and then for the rest of the movie, you have that baggy or skinny-necked kind of version of Gigantus of Godzilla. So you might want to check out that opening. I don't know. It might be the same. I have a feeling it's the same.
From what I
raised it, and I have to admit, I can't answer it totally definitive answer until I look at it. It was something to check out.
From what I remember watching, Godzilla Raids again in its original Japanese, the suit design looks like it's the Yakushu Goji suit, which was the new design they made for that film. I don't think I saw any instances of the actual original Shodai Goji suit except for Stockfisher and Dr. Yamane's conference where they're discussing the monsters.
Yeah, which has all that Kronos music in the American version. It's interesting because having seen that in the theater, and when they showed those flashbacks, it was clearly Godzilla. And again, as I said before, I was like, why doesn't anybody else recognize this as Godzilla? Am I going crazy?
Yeah, there's a story behind this actually. They were trying to do another film called The Volcano Monsters around that same time period. And that's where the whole mix-up happened, because they're going to use the Godzilla anchor suits to portray the T-Rex and the Ankylosaurus.
I know. I love the fact that Godzilla was being redefined as a T-Rex, and they were going to remove all radiation and glowing back spines and all of that. Was he also a pregnant T-Rex? I wouldn't be surprised. It was all these things I heard about that.
Right.
But it's just as well they didn't do the volcano. I mean, at least the Godzilla, the Gigantus, is pretty much the Japanese movie as we know it. Although it might have been interesting to see what they might have done. But isn't it intriguing that Godzilla, as a character, as a licensed kind of licensable character, no one saw the potential. They tried to hide the fact. That's the reason the name Gigantus was made up. The whole idea back then was the way people think when they go to theaters, and this is true. I'm not going to get ripped off. This is the same thing I saw before. So the producers would try to do everything they could to say, no, this isn't what, this is like nothing you've ever seen before would be the standard line, right?
Of course.
When people went to see War of the Colossal Beasts, the handful of people who went to see it, they changed that from Revenge of the Colossal Man to for the same reason. Even though the story is telling you it's Glenn Manning, they wanted to disguise the fact that it was a sequel because people would always say, this is a ripoff. This is the same movie. They did it, whatever. So that's why it wasn't because they couldn't get the rights to the Godzilla name. They deliberately said, no, we say Godzilla, they're going to think it's what we've already been showing them, a ripoff. So let's give them a new name.
Yeah.
When
Sure.
I was a kid, I thought the movie was called The Gigantics. I took the test. Yeah, that's how my young brain interpreted it, because there were a couple of them, right? Oh, these are the Gigantics, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, guys, I don't know. You got enough, or you need some more? I think we got more than enough.
I'm really going to have to go pretty soon. You guys are too knowledgeable and fun to listen to. I hate to quit, but I am going to have to go.
Yeah, this has been it's been a very good time, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary.
And everything worked out technically as well. That's good.
Yeah.
Great.
I've got a couple things to tell you. I'm going to email you later on, but thanks again. This has been great.
Oh, my pleasure.
You seem to have a good time, so I hope.
It was a lot of fun.
Don't mind the barking dog, folks.
I had the ringing telephone. You can have the barking dog.
Well, again, thanks, Gary, for the good times tonight, especially all the Dinosaurs Attack here, because some of that was a lot of stuff I legit did not know.
Oh, definitely.
And I've read up on Dinosaurs Attack all throughout the years, but hearing some of these personal stories and whatnot, felt like
That's why I'm doing these books, because so many people were saying, you can't just let this disappear. Yeah, the older you get, the more you forget, so I better do it, right?
Yes, do it while you can still, remember stuff.
Yeah, because it could just go, right?
Yeah.
But as long as there are folks like you out there who care about this stuff.
Yeah, we look forward to it.
Yep.
Use my brain and remember everything I can, yeah.
Yep, this podcast is not just about the science, it's also about preserving the memory of, dinosaur pop culture and whatnot.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, then. I'm going to turn us off here in a second.
All right, adios, folks. This has been the Prehistory Travelers Guide podcast. I'm your host, Greg, and I'll see y'all next time. Ending recording now.